What is Thanksgiving? Is it a harmonious feast shared between Pilgrims and Native Americans, as often portrayed in our collective memory? Or does it mark the beginning of a darker saga, one that some would call the onset of a genocide? This holiday, shrouded in myth and celebration, carries with it a history that is as complex as it is contested. Today, we peel back the layers of Thanksgiving, tracing its origins from the 17th century to its evolution into a national holiday. Prepare to uncover the raw and unvarnished truths as we present a history that challenges the familiar narrative, revealing the profound heritage about a day that is both revered and mourned. The Pilgrims, part of a sect that sought to separate from the Church of England, opposed the Church's elaborate ceremonies and structure, which they believed strayed from biblical teachings. They envisioned a church that was autonomous, where the congregation followed a simpler form of worship based directly on Scripture. Their radical beliefs were not just a religious stance, but a political challenge to the intertwined authority of church and state, leading to their persecution and eventual flight from England. Across the ocean, the Wampanoag people had lived for millennia with a deep connection to the land. They, along with other tribes, had complex societies with established trade networks, diplomatic alliances, and at times, fierce conflicts. The Wampanoag had been trading with Europeans for decades, but the arrival of the Pilgrims was a turning point. Squanto, a Wampanoag, who had been enslaved and taken to Europe before returning home, played a crucial role in mediating between the two groups. In this era of exploration and conquest, the interactions between Europeans and Native Americans were varied, ranging from mutually beneficial trade to violent conflict. Both sides were complex, with their own values and practices that could seem foreign and, at times, cruel to the other. Native American tribes had their own forms of warfare and justice, which could include acts that were brutal by European standards. Captives could be subjected to ritual torture, which served as a form of social catharsis and a means of reinforcing tribal solidarity in the face of loss. Yet, it's crucial to understand these practices within their cultural context, which was marked by a deep spiritual connection to the land and a rich tradition of storytelling and oral history. As we delve into the past, it's essential to remember that history is seldom black and white. The moral judgments of today cannot be neatly applied to a time of survival and conquest, where the concepts of good and evil were as fluid as the change in tides. The story of Thanksgiving is a tapestry of human experience, woven with threads of courage, desperation, alliance, and conflict. The Pilgrims, part of a radical Puritan faction, sought not just to purify the Church of England but to separate from it entirely. Their quest for a pure form of worship, unencumbered by what they saw as the corrupting influence of the established church, was a direct challenge to the religious uniformity imposed by King James. Their dissent was not merely theological, but also a political act of defiance against the intertwining of church and state power. In Leiden, the Pilgrims found the religious autonomy they craved, but their time in Holland was marked by economic hardship and cultural isolation. The Dutch society was more liberal and commercially focused than they were accustomed to, and the Pilgrims feared the erosion of their religious values and English identity. This concern, coupled with the desire to evangelize in a new land, propelled their decision to embark on the perilous journey to America. The agreement known as the Mayflower Contract with merchant adventurers was a pragmatic step, but it also reflected the Pilgrims' commitment to community and mutual responsibility. The contract stipulated not only the financial arrangements, but also the collective welfare and governance of the colony, setting a precedent for a community-oriented approach to colonization. The 66-day journey of the Mayflower is emblematic of the Pilgrims' resilience. The ship, designed for cargo rather than passenger transport, was ill-suited for the voyage, and the conditions on board were dire. Yet, the Pilgrims' steadfast faith and communal bonds sustained them through the trials of the Atlantic crossing.
Journal entry, William Bradford. Being thus arrived in a good harbour and brought safe to land, they fell upon their knees and blessed the God of heaven, who had brought them over the vast and furious ocean.
Drafted as a response to dissent among the passengers, the Mayflower Compact was a seminal document in the history of democratic governance. It established a framework for self-governance and collective decision-making, principles that would echo through American history. The Compact's assertion that government derives its powers from the consent of the governed was a radical idea that would influence future democratic charters, including the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. The selection of Plymouth as the settlement site was a critical decision. The area's cleared fields and running streams presented an inviting landscape for the weary travelers. The absence of the Patuxent, victims of an epidemic brought by Europeans, was a tragic stroke of fortune for the Pilgrims. It provided them with a cleared land to settle, which they saw as divine providence. Importantly, the Pilgrims did not arrive with the intention of causing harm or conflict with Native Americans. They were largely unaware of the complex societies they were about to encounter, and did not foresee the future consequences of their settlement. Their first winter was a brutal test of survival, with nearly half the colonists perishing. Yet those who survived laid the foundations for a community that would endure, embodying the ideals of self-reliance, faith, and democratic governance.
Journal entry, William Bradford. That which was most sad and lamentable was that in 2 or 3 months' time, half of their company died, especially in January and February, being the depth of winter and wanting houses and other comforts, being infected with the scurvy and other diseases which this long voyage and their inaccommodate condition had brought upon them.
The interactions between Native Americans and the Pilgrims were complex and multifaceted. While some Native Americans, like Squanto and the Wampanoag tribe, chose to assist the Pilgrims, teaching them vital survival skills, others viewed the newcomers with suspicion and hostility. These varying degrees of acceptance and animosity were influenced by a multitude of factors, including previous encounters with European explorers, traders, or slavers, which had sometimes been exploitative or violent. The diversity of responses to the Pilgrims can be understood against a backdrop of intertribal dynamics and the impact of European colonization. Some tribes saw alliances with Europeans as a strategic advantage against rival groups, while others recognized the threat of land loss and cultural erosion that these new settlers represent. The history of Native American and European interactions prior to the Pilgrims' arrival set the stage for a cautious and, at times, adversarial relationship.